Okay, we're back in the early morning, sneaking around, looking at philosophy videos. Everyone is still sleeping this morning. Today, I figured I've been start to check out something which someone requested that I do a video on, which is this. Where did it go? I thought I had it over here. Um, yes, here we go. Oops. Um, it's this levels of intelligibility, Neoplatonism, and 4E cognitive science by John Vervaeke. So I don't really know who this is. I think someone has mentioned them on my channel previously. I listened to a little bit of the beginning of this lecture and I was trying to record it, but I had it like this, and so you couldn't hear the audio. It's too hard. So that's why at the beginning he gives a little introduction. So uh, I think the idea of connecting this idea of Neoplatonism to cognitive science is very interesting. I don't know how he's going to do it. I was kind of thinking a little bit of maybe how it would go. I mean, I'm not super familiar with Neoplatonism. I had classes in graduate school on it. I really enjoy ancient philosophy, pre-Socratic philosophy. Guess what would you call Neoplatonism? It's like early modern? No, it's too early. 200 CE? When what? These are things I should know. I think it's around two. Huh. Anyway, so I know something about Plotinus. I think he's the main guy, right? Um, the idea of Platonism is a serious idea. I think I've always been very interested in the argument, the one over many argument, and Plato's philosophy generally. I have a lot of videos on my channel about Plato and the Pre-Socratics. I don't have anything on Neoplatonism now I think about it, or Anselm, or any of those guys. That's much later, obviously, but that whole period. What do you call that period? Just as in medieval, 200 CE or so. Anyway, so um, I think Platonism is interesting and it's a serious view. Neoplatonism, a distinctive, interesting combination of various views floating around at the time. I always thought of it as a way of taking the forms of Plato and putting them in the mind of God. And there's this great chain of being or something like that. Um, Something about the form of the good. I know that, and the intellect or soul or something. Anyway, so I don't really keep up with this stuff. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. And as I was trying to say, I take these views seriously. Platon, I tend towards nominalism about properties, and my views about the self are pretty deflationary. So these are areas where I've never really found a lot of resonation in the views of like Plato and into the Neoplatonists, perhaps. But I'm interested in it, and I think it is a serious and interesting view. So I'll be very curious to see how it's revived, so to speak, and connected to 4E cognitive science, which is this. Uh, what are the 4 E's? I've done this before, and I've always failed to get it right. Inactive, embodied. There's some other ones. Extended, maybe. Inactive, embodied, extended. There's another E. I feel like I should, what? Inactive, embedded. Embedded, embodied, extended. Generally taking the body seriously in the environment that the animal is in. These are things that I support. I don't think they get rid of all the standard views in cognitive science, but I definitely think we got to have a picture of the whole body and the environment and to understand the mind. Okay, so interesting things. I'm curious where this is going to go. So this guy was just introducing him, um, and now for the main event.
Lucky to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Oh, I know. I keep interrupting this, but I did want to mention, by the way, I'm the worst at this, but I did want to mention that coming up in a few weeks, on March 4th, I'll be talking with Gualtiero Pincinini. Oh man, I better get better at saying that before then. Um, and Gualtiero, some people may know him as he was the founder and original organizer of Brains blog. It's just a group blog in a philosophy of mind. It's become very active since then. It's a great place to see like people talk about their new books in philosophy of mind, cognitive science. If you've never checked it out, and other things too. They have teamed up with uh, Neuromechanisms, this other group that does online webinars or something like that. So it's a very cool and active group over there. And Gualtiero's founded that. We'll be talking about his books on philosophy of mind and computation and all sorts of interesting things. So that's very exciting. And just more generally, as we go towards March, it's only a few weeks of February left. Uh, as I go back to my regular teaching schedule, I'll still be doing things on my YouTube channel, primarily on Mondays. That's going to be my online day. The rest is going to be sort of in the classroom. So Mondays I'll be online, and I'll be planning on doing my Consciousness Live series on Mondays, if possible. I still have a couple of other scheduled in the works after Gualtiero, and then I have my office hours that I'm planning on doing, and I'll do those on Mondays as well. And maybe if I get to any of these other kind of reaction-y type videos, then I'll put them up whenever I have them. But I'll probably be recording them on Mondays if I'm doing anything like that. So that still looks like at least I'll make it through the spring in this way. We'll see. I mean, the only one who is committing themselves is me, and the only one who holds themselves to that commitment is me. So we'll see how tough I am on myself. And now, finally, to the video. He kind of looks familiar. I mean, I know I just watched their intro. He kind of looks familiar. I wonder if I've seen him somewhere else.
Well, I want to thank you, Stephen, for that intimidating introduction. Now I have to live up to it. I also want to thank the hospitality of Ralston. It's been truly wonderful and warm. I thoroughly enjoyed my brief dip into the instruction on ancient Greek. I was like seriously impressed. I was like, whoa. I got little sections of it. Like I knew when he was talking about Socratic aporia and a few things like that. So any of the philosophical terms would leap out. But otherwise, it was like you're just conversing about Odysseus swimming around in the water. It's like, what's going on?
It was all Greek to him, in other words. It is funny how I know I remember this is besides the point, but I remember when I first started studying philosophy, and then like over time, one of my professors handed out this little like handout of like Greek and Latin words that we're gonna find in like philosophy texts and like with their meanings and so forth. So you do pick up this specialized Latin and Greek vocabulary. And I studied a lot of ancient philosophy, but I didn't read any Greek either. And one of my professors was always dogging us about that. It's like, you really want to study this stuff, you got to learn the Greek. So he would tell us a lot about the Greek words, but then you only know a few Greek words. You don't know like the whole language. So, of course, I'm not a serious ancient scholar or anything, but I put a fair amount of time into trying to understand it.
I was just really, really impressed. So as Stephen said, my work is an attempt to integrate, by the way, my BSc was in cognitive science, which includes psychology. My work is about trying to integrate that cognitive science, that cognitive psychology, with, I think, a very defensible reinterpretation of an oft-used but poorly understood term, spirituality. What is it to take seriously the possibility of integrating cognitive science and spirituality? And so I want to begin. I just noticed to get a couple things from my...
Interesting. Not really sure. I didn't see that kind of thing
I wanted to share with you, actually. a couple of books that I think are exemplary. So my talk is on levels of intelligibility, levels of the self, realizing dialectic. I hear you've been talking about.
Oh, that's not what it says here. Levels of intelligibility, levels of the self. Uh-huh. I mean, it is interesting. You do see something sort of like this idea in Plato. With a divided line, one side representing the way the nature of reality is, the other side representing the mind's knowing about that side. Correspondence between, on the one hand, the states of the knower, and on the other hand, the states of reality. Huh. Okay.
Self. Like consciousness, it is that which we are most familiar and is simultaneously most mysterious. And I'm going to attempt to bring the ancient Neoplatonic tradition and the cutting edge of current cognitive science together to try and address that burning question.
What is the self? Okay, so this will be interesting. I mean, like I said at the beginning, my views about the self are fairly deflationary. People press me on this all the time, but nonetheless, uh, now I'm trying to really dredge up all the Neoplatonism. So I definitely know that there's something about like, okay, we'll see where this is going. Very
Now, Eric
interesting.
Pearl has done outstanding commentary on Plotinus. Plotinus is considered the father of Neoplatonism. He's around sort of 205 to 270 of the Common Era. And I'll talk a lot about what Neoplatonism is. So if it's a little bit obscure to you, hang in there.
205 to 270. Okay. Well, not too bad, too. So, what are we going to call this period of time?
It'll become, I hope, clearer. Plotinus wrote a whole bunch of essays called Aeneids, and I won't go into the reasons why they're called that. And Eric Pearl, in his commentary, makes two interrelated and I think really important points. First is he translates the title of the Aeneid in a new way. The title is usually translated as on the three principal hypostases. Hypostasis, standing under, the underlying nature of things. And that's a fair enough translation. I think Pearl's translation is brilliant and much more accurate in disclosing what the text is about.
It is an important point that texts in ancient languages can really benefit from good translations, and it is actually a philosophical matter how you translate these things. So having a good translation is super important.
It on the three primary levels of reality. Leveled ontology. The idea that we don't have a flat ontology, but ontology comes in levels in some important way. And then that leads into the second point he makes.
I know one person kind of who does levels of ontology. What's this? Chris McDaniel. McDaniel? Yeah. He plays in that philosophical band, 21st Century Monads. If they're still around, I don't know. Uh, that's the only contemporary work I'm familiar with on levels ontology. I never really understood what it means for there to be levels of being, to be honest with you, how there could be ways of existing that are different from each other. So I've always found that very challenging. So this whole idea of there being levels. Well, okay.
That self-knowledge and knowledge of reality are inseparable. They're bound up together. This is what he argues, Plotinus is arguing. Now these two...
Wait, this is what he argues Plotinus is arguing. Who's he? Oh, that Eric Pearl guy. Okay. So that guy's arguing that Plotinus is arguing that knowledge of the self and wait, what do you say?
that self-knowledge and knowledge of reality are inseparable. They're bound up.
Okay, interesting. Knowledge of the self and knowledge of reality. Interesting. Okay.
Together. This is what he argues, Plotinus is arguing. Now, these two come together in Pearl's argument to the conclusion of a coordinated co-participation between levels of the self, or levels of the psyche, as I might sometimes say, and levels of reality. So reality is leveled and the psyche is leveled, but they are leveled in coordinating and co-participating manner. Now, he cites Pierre Hadot, who I hope you get to learn from in your education here. Hadot was instrumental in bringing back the idea of philosophy as a way of life, not the academic study of techniques of argumentation and conceptual analysis that promised much and has not actually delivered as much.
I mean, that is a good point. These ancient philosophers really did see philosophy as a way of life, like not simply. So when you were in a different school of philosophy, like if you were a such and such, like a follower of Plato or a follower of a hedonism or stoicism or whatever, then that meant you lived a certain way. It didn't just mean that you like accepted certain arguments and so forth. So this is a conception of philosophy that has been lost. Yeah. Or, not, or it's coming back, but it's like, yeah, it's a different emphasis, like academic philosophy, definitely associated with the way of life, but not in the way these guys meant. And most of the philosophers that are academics don't really see themselves as trying to advocate a big picture way of living. They're working on small questions like what is intentionality, what is small, what is the sub response to part 4 of the response to part 6 of the main argument of the rebuttal against part 7 of the main argument for something. That's what academic philosophers are doing often. Okay, interesting. Okay, I like where this is going. I mean, as I was saying, I don't really feel the need to have substantial views about the self. Uh, I don't see the reason really that you are required to postulate some kind of non-physical element to reality or the mind. But I find it interesting, and I have some small level of credence or belief, like something where I'm like, okay, that's not a way the world might be. I take it serious. The arguments for it are very interesting, but I just never really have been convinced that there is a reason to override the physicality of the world in this way. So maybe we'll get to one.
But instead, philosophy as what the word means, the love of wisdom, the transformation of one's consciousness, cognition, character towards the cultivation of wisdom. So Hadot, in talking about Plotinus, says, in the broadest sense of the self, soul, itself involving many levels, intellect, and the one, these are the levels of reality in the Neoplatonic framework.
Yeah, what did you say? The one, intellect, and soul. These are the levels of reality in the Neoplatonic framework. Yeah, okay, it's coming back to me. The one, the form of the good from Plato, as far as I remember. The source of well, it's the source of the intelligibility of the world, but also somehow the ground of it. Then there's the intellect, which is somehow I don't remember all the details, but it's like the understanding or grasping part of that. And then there's the soul, which is somehow, so the intellect's like the rational part, the form of the good. How are these levels though? One's more, I mean, I sort of remember all of this stuff, like the realismum, the realist of the real. And I sort of remember these ideas that that which is realist is that which can sort of exist in a non-dependent way, and that which is less real is dependent on something else. And I this is all dredging from memory, but does that? How does that? I don't. I never really saw how that translated to like there being a real a real difference in their ontology. They're different kinds of things, maybe, but how are they different, like levels of ontology in a way that isn't just saying one's like eternal and non-physical and the other? I don't know. So it's yeah. Anyway, so let's continue.
Are not only metaphysical principles or levels of reality, but levels of the self. The self, here's another quote, the self, we may say, is whatever level it attains, which is a very different idea than the notion of the self that we carry around as usually a sort of monadic, simple, single substance. This is the idea of the self as leveled, and that its proper instantiation is the level at which it has attained its deepest correspondence to a level of reality.
Yeah, the monadic. I think he's contrasting this with like the Cartesian conception of the self, right? The simple monadic property thing or whatever. Level conception of the self. How does that relate to cognitive science? Well, you have the different levels of the nervous system. Is that where this is going? It's interesting. Let's go.
Now, my task, as we reflect on and wrestle together with these very provocative and strange sounding claims, levels of reality, levels of the self. The level is something that is trying to attain a level that is its ultimate realization. What does that mean? The words are all individual English words, but when you put them together, it sounds like gobbledygook in modern ears. What's going on here? How are we going to make sense of this? Now, there's going to be 3 stages to my attempts to make sense of this. The first is I'm going to pursue how do we make sense of this Neoplatonic psycho-ontology. What do I mean by psycho-ontology? Psyche has to do with the self, ontology has to do with being, and then in the Neoplatonic framework, they're woven together. And again, in a way that seems very strange to us as we are enmeshed in a Cartesian framework. That'll be the first stage. It'll be a fairly long stage of my talk. Second stage, explain why a 21st century cognitive scientist, I'll take myself as an example, finds it both highly plausible and very rationally defensible. Why this view from the ancient world is so consonant with current cognitive science. That'll also be a fairly long section. The third section will be the shortest. I want to explain why this revised by its interaction with cognitive science, why this revised Neoplatonism could respond to the current challenges facing the Western world that I have called the meaning crisis. So that's how I'm going to proceed, those 3 stages. Okay, so the first stage about trying to make sense of this psycho-ontology.
Meaning crisis. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the semantic apocalypse. But that's a different concept. So meaning, this has got to be like meaning in life because of that's what these guys all talked about. Meaning crisis. I don't really see, a meaning crisis for myself, but that's not what he's talking about. Huh, interesting. Okay.
So Neoplatonism is kind of like the grand unified field theory. That's what physicists are after, but it's the grand unified field theory of ancient philosophy and ancient spirituality. It's a
Ancient
culmination.
spirituality. What is this stuff about spirituality? Spirituality. Does he just mean non-physicality? Like, because these guys all believe there's a non-physical aspect to reality, and then there was a directedness to the physical side of things, and that, certainly in the Socratic, Platonic tradition, being a healthy person involved having your mind in sort of right correspondence with the way things are, so to speak, having reason in charge of the emotions and so forth. So that's all very interesting. Is that both? What's spirituality? I don't know. I'm not a spiritual person. I don't really vibe that way, but I'm not sure. Spirituality usually just means like you want to believe in some creator type thing, but not the traditional God. Is that what it means by spirituality? Hmm, definitely that's here. Well, in Plotinus, is it? There is a demiurge from Plato. I know that. Okay, maybe I should just listen. We'll see what's going on.
It's a synoptic integration. And it's a
I like
synoptic.
that metaphor, though, unified field theory. Yeah, because it's like Neoplatonism is like all those traditions coming out. I mean, technically, do I even know where Plotinus is from? Is he Greek? Plotinus. Doesn't sound like it. Man. Okay.
Integration of at least three main philosophical traditions.
Okay.
Let me just list them and briefly introduce you to them, and then I'll come back and show you how Plotinus weaves them together to give us Neoplatonism.
Okay, so let's see. We're already half hour into this, so let's pause here. We'll come back for more of this action. This is very interesting, so I'm expecting to learn a lot from this, and this is definitely a part of my knowledge that I don't have an updated grasp on. And even I'm thinking about like the videos I made for the history of philosophy that I did for my like intro to philosophy lectures. I don't think I have anything on Neoplatonism in there. Um, I mean, in the philosophy of religion, I have stuff from Anselm, Aquinas, and all those guys, but that's a different tradition, one might think. Related, I would say, but okay, so go. This is gonna be fun.